Tonight on KQED Newsroom, what President Trump's visit to San Diego and a congressional race in Pennsylvania mean for California. The police chief for Oakland schools says arming teachers will not make schools safer.
It was irresponsible, and it was a ridiculous comment made by the president.
Plus, the students of Encinal High School in Alameda sound off about why they walked out of school this week.
Stop the bullets! Save the kids! Stop the bullets!
Hello and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. We begin with a wild week in politics. On Tuesday, President Trump made his first visit to California since taking office. He toured the U.S. Mexico border and examined wall prototypes. Also this week, a spokesman for Immigration and Customs Enforcement resigned in the wake of a Bay Area raid that led to the arrest of more than 200 immigrants. ICE spokesman James Schaaf said he did not want to spread falsehoods on behalf of the Trump administration. Meanwhile, special counsel Robert Mueller issued a subpoena for documents from the Trump Organization. That came on the heels of House Intelligence Committee Republicans saying they found no evidence of collusion with Russia in the 2016 elections. And a narrow victory in a Pennsylvania election may have lessons for key California races this fall. And to discuss all of this, I'm now joined by San Francisco Chronicle reporter Joe Garofoli, Politico senior writer Carla Marinucci, and Hoover Institution fellow Lanhee Chen. Welcome to all of you. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Lanhee, let's begin with you, given all that's happened this week, from the Mueller subpoena to President Trump's visit to the California border, and let's not forget Rex Tillerson's firing. How would you sum up this week for the Trump administration?
Well, welcome to the Trump White House, where every week feels like 3 months. I mean, this is a remarkable amount of activity. I think to a certain degree, though, this is exactly the kind of cadence and exactly the kind of White House that President Trump wants. I think he thrives on some element of chaos, particularly around him. Talk about his inner circle. Let's not forget that he brings the apprentice ethos to Washington. But beyond that, I think also the kinds of themes he talked about this week, whether it's immigration while he was in California, being more aggressive on drug dealers. That's something that he talked about this week as well. I mean, a lot of these themes are exactly the themes he wants when he's talking to the Republican base, the base that he perceives he needs to have a Republican majority return to the House and the Senate in November and ultimately to be reelected in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, I was down there at the border this week for the Trump visit with hundreds of his supporters, and I have to say, you're exactly right on this. Those folks were right behind him on all of these issues. The churn at the White House at the top is not bothering them at all. The fact that it's looking less like The Apprentice and more like Survivor there at the White House. I mean, it's like...
And who are these supporters who come out? Are they Californians? Are they flying
they
in
were
from
coming
elsewhere?
from as far away as Chicago. His base is with him. They were there with the American flags. The idea of the border is a very big deal to them. This issue of the ICE raids is a very big deal to them. They're supportive of him all the way. And I have to say, most of them did not care a bit about the Russian story or the Stormy Daniels story, which, the media has gone on a lot. So I think that visit worked with his base. It also fired up Democrats all across California as well.
Sure. I mean, he went after Jerry Brown. He went after Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf.
Which they loved, because every Democratic politician said, please mention my name. Please mention my name. As we saw last week, Gavin Newsom started fundraising within hours after having been called out by Sessions. You're right, this was an appeal to his base. But as we saw in Pennsylvania, the base may not be enough. He lost. And we're saying the president did lose that race in Western Pennsylvania, a district that he was up by 22 points in the election. And those are his base voters. The Democrats won that seat. That's a warning for Republicans. He's appealing to base, but he's got to start broadening his appeal if he hopes to be reelected.
Well, let's talk some more about Conor Lamb, the Democrat who won in Pennsylvania. I mean, is it a one-off, do you think, or to Joe's point that this is really hurting him where it counts with the base and future Republican candidates?
If it's possible, I think the answer is both. I think on the one hand, you have a candidate in Conor Lamb who did run as a very conservative Democrat. I mean, how many districts can you imagine? How many districts can you imagine a Democratic candidate standing with an AR-15 in a campaign ad, right? I mean, that was Conor Lamb. And the reality is you had a Republican candidate who had difficulty getting traction, who was actually actually quite anti-union in a district that was very pro-union. So there are reasons to believe that this is particularized. On the other hand, you do have a lot of energy in the Democratic base. You do have a Republican base that's a little bit disheartened, frankly. They're still angry over the failure to repeal Obamacare last year. That still continues to be a factor. So I think it's a little bit of both. On the one hand, you shouldn't be sort of thinking that this is exactly what we're going to see in November. On the other hand, there are trends here that are worrisome for Republicans.
And there was no Democratic primary there, and this is the difference in California, because we're seeing in the U.S. Senate race in California, Feinstein being challenged from the left by Kevin De Leon. These primaries in California are a worrisome thing, I think, to the Democrats here, because in some of these races that looked to be easy for them to pick off, Darrell Iss's seat, Ed Roy's seat down there, Rohrabacher, yeah, they've got a half a dozen Democrats now vying for these seats, and it's very possible that 2 Republicans are going to end up in the winning in the primary as a result. And Democrats are really worried about that.
Oh, they are. The chairman of the party is openly saying we have an overpopulation problem. Please get out of the race. He's actively asking Democrats to leave. Those Orange County seats aren't as conservative or aren't as sort of swing as we might think that they are. Yeah. Those are voters who typically vote in state ballot measures for the conservative side of things. So Democrats, those are not in the bag. And it may have been a blessing to Republicans that those Republicans left the seat, because they got to have stronger candidates come in.
So what is the lesson then from Pennsylvania for California, right? You've got an overcrowded Democratic field for a lot of these congressional seats. California is hoping to use this state to help it take over the House in November. You've got an overcrowded Democratic field. What do Democrats need to do in California with their messaging to get the votes? I
think the lesson that I saw, and I think some others saw in Pennsylvania, was have candidates that look like your district.
Yeah.
You can't, like you would, if you start talking about single-payer health care in Western Pennsylvania, you get laughed at as a bunch of socialists. But Connor Lamb looked like the district. So I think the lesson for all these Orange County districts, some of the conservative districts in Central Valley in California, have someone who looks like your
for instance,
district.
Devin Nunes' seat, California 22 district. You've got a prosecutor now who's up for that seat. It looked like there's no way you could take out Devin Nunes, but the fact is, I mean, it's a Republican-leaning district, but now the candidate, Andrew Jantz, the Democrat, is saying it's going to be possible. If Connor Lamb could do it in a district that was so strongly Republican, a lot of Democrats are saying here that hope, is there.
Yeah, I think the challenge, though, is that there are divisions within the Democratic Party electorate as well. And maybe you see a little bit more of that in California, where some of these candidates are getting pulled to the left. And so you may have a candidate that ends up being a little bit too progressive for a district like California 39, which is Ed Royce's seat down in Orange County, which I think, Joe, absolutely right, by and large, may be less swingy or less progressive than people think. If you end up with a candidate who's trying to out-left the other candidate, your general election Democrat, if there is one, may end up being too far to the left to really be credible come November. So I think that's a big concern for Democrats here in California.
And speaking of the left, right, I want to move on to immigration real quickly. We have Kevin De Leon now. He appointed the first undocumented immigrant to a statewide post on a commission that will help advise on college access for underrepresented populations.
That was a huge marker, I think, and really has fired up a lot of people on the right. She's a very credible attorney, born in Oaxaca, someone who did not qualify for DACA because she went back to Mexico. But the fact is, she's been appointed by De Leon to help undocumented immigrants get into college in California. And of course, that's being cheered by the left and being vilified by the right. Yet another really divisive immigration issue that comes right home to California.
And the raids that have been happening, right? Let's broaden it out, take a look at the bigger picture, because now you have a number of Central Valley farmers who once supported Trump. They're now sounding the alarm, saying, you know what, these raids are starting to hurt our farm worker population here in California.
And there's already a shortage of farm labor.
Yes.
And so this is going to drive people underground, and on the practical sense. And then on the political side, it will increase the urgency for Latinos to vote.
Well, but this is an issue where President Trump if he really wanted to come out and forge bipartisan consensus, there is a pathway to do that. But so far, at least, I think, unfortunately, the administration has tended to adopt some of that rhetoric and some of the positioning on this issue that will make a compromise very difficult. Ultimately, if the president wanted to do it, I think he would uniquely be able to do it. It's just become a very polarized environment
and you have
on both
the humanitarian issue, too. I mean, you had a case this week in the Central Valley where a couple, farm workers looking for work, in an SUV, were about to be pulled over by ICE. There were parents of 6 kids. The car crashed after a chase. The 6 kids are now orphaned. And I think this kind of case is getting attention. The fact that 23 farm workers last week were brought in by ICE, and Senator Feinstein protested on this and said, why are we going after farm workers? I think this is where the administration's policies on this are going to fire up the grassroots. We've already seen that. And as you said, working in the benefit of some of the elected officials who've stood up to them, like Libby Schaaf. This stuff has been gold for her, as Joe said.
Yeah, there's 2 people who could help Trump on this and could help bridge a compromise, and it's Kevin McCarthy and Devin Nunes. They represent
farming
the Central
districts,
Valley, farming
right.
districts, but they've been reluctant for years to take a stand on these things and to find that compromise that could appease conservatives, but they haven't done it.
All right, much to watch, but what a wild week it's been. It started Monday with
it's not even over yet.
ridiculous and exit, and it just kept on going.
Friday's the day when things happen.
Yeah. Someone could have been fired during this show.
Oh, you are bad. All right, Joe Garofoli, Carla Marinucci, and Lanhee Chen. Thank you all. Thank you. 1 month after 17 people were killed at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida, tens of thousands of students across the country walked out of school Wednesday morning to send a message. They said they were protesting the inaction of Congress on gun violence. Meanwhile, President Trump reversed himself on several gun control proposals, and he's now advocating that teachers be armed in classrooms. Joining me now to discuss this are San Francisco Chronicle education reporter Jill Tucker, Oakland Unified School District's police chief, Jeff Godown, and Pittsburgh High School teacher, Peter Gorelick. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
And Chief, you lead a unit of 20 sworn police officers, another 100 school security officers who are civilians who are not armed. What's your reaction to the suggestion that teachers be armed?
My initial reaction to the president's statement, it was irresponsible, and it was a ridiculous comment made by the president. He has no experience in safety in schools. I know he's developing a blue ribbon panel of people that, again, have no experience in the school system, and it was just an irresponsible statement. There is not a positive aspect of arming teachers that I've seen, I can come up with, and I've talked to many teachers and union representatives who say the same thing. Teachers are there to teach. They go to school to teach. It is not their job to carry handguns and prevent violence. That's what I'm paid to do, and that's what my officers are paid to do.
What are your biggest concerns, though, if teachers have guns?
My biggest concern is, what is the teacher now responsible to do? Are they responsible to get out on the hallway and stop a student with a long-range rifle, such as Florida? Are they supposed to stop a robbery out in front of the school? Are they now responsible for policing the school, such as my people would be responsible for? I mean, really, what is the reason why they're carrying a gun, and what are their responsibilities? It's fraught with problems and training and where they're going to carry the guns. And as a student in a school, how am I going to feel if I know a teacher's carrying a gun? What kind of school environment does that make me feel? Safe or less safe that the teachers have to carry guns? So I don't see any positive aspects of it. Now, if you poll some of the folks that live in the Midwest, I'm sure you're going to find some people that think arming teachers is the right thing to do. But I see nothing positive about this whatsoever. And
Peter Gorelick, you're a teacher at Pittsburgh High School. What do you think about what he just said about that student-teacher relationship if teachers are armed?
Yeah, well, I want to say, first of all, I 100% agree that it's a terrible idea to have teachers armed. And one of the things that I was really thinking about is that what makes an effective teacher is that they establish a relationship with their students. And that relationship involves trust, it involves openness, it involves students feeling like they're comfortable to share anything in a safe environment. And the moment that you have somebody with a gun, it changes. Students will feel, I believe that many students will really feel threatened or scared, and it will just not be the same kind of environment. And I really feel like the education of students is it's gonna be much worse. I don't see it as being a good solution at all.
And teaching in many districts is already a very stressful job.
Yeah, you can say that again. You know, I make this joke with my students, but honestly, there are teachers who are a little bit high-strung already, and it is an incredibly stressful job. And I truly believe that you will have more instances of teachers kind of losing their cool, and you're going to have classroom tragedies because a teacher just, you know, some kid just pushed him or her to the limit, and you're going to have accidents and you're going to have situations. And I believe more people will be hurt that way than any, you know, stopping a mass shooting, for example.
And there's a new poll, actually, that just came out today, Jill, on this.
Yeah, in general, you know, teachers oppose having other teachers armed. The Gallup poll today was 73% of teachers opposed the idea. 58% said they would feel less safe. 18% said they would be willing to carry a gun, and that's out of teachers. A quarter of teachers, actually, of the 3.2 million teachers nationwide, give or take, have own guns. You know, many of them are gun owners, but in general, poll after poll after poll agree with Peter here, saying we don't want our fellow teachers armed.
And yet it is, although it's illegal in California, it is legal in at least 14 other states where teachers can be armed. You've got Texas, Missouri, Ohio, Indiana, now Florida as well, following the Parkland shooting. A lot of these states made these changes after the Sandy Hook shooting. Yeah. But after what happened in Florida, do you see the momentum picking up for teachers to be armed in other states across the nation?
Well, certainly I think communities in general and states are talking about it. Is this something that they would want? Where we've seen it in the past, so for example in Idaho where you see it, it's in some rural areas where they, the local communities have said we want this because the sheriff is 45 minutes away. In Arizona and other states, teachers can be armed, but they have to get permission from their local school board. So this is largely a discussion that's happening in local communities, not really in California, certainly not the Bay Area. But I think there's a lot of folks talking about this at their local school boards and in their local communities for sure.
And Chief, go down the argument for arming teachers from the NRA and from President Trump is that this would be a deterrent based on what you see out there with your officers. Would it be a deterrent, and would it be effective in stopping a determined shooter?
I'm glad you asked the question, because the answer is a resounding no, and I'll tell you why. We need to make sure that we're focused on the subject matter, and we get confused between school safety and the incident that occurred in Florida. The everyday schools in California and in Oakland, and I'm sure in other Pittsburgh areas, are very safe. Kids go to school. We might recover a handgun every once in a while, but for the most part, schools are safe in our district as well as most districts in California. The situation occurred where this gentleman comes in with a high-powered rifle. All the metal detectors in the world, the one police officer that was stationed in Florida didn't stop him. And I can tell you, and I use this analogy, if that kid had come into my office and I have 3 officers that are stationed there plus myself, with what I'm wearing on my belt, it would be hard-pressed for us to stop him. So now do you expect one teacher with a small caliber handgun to walk out in the hallway and stop somebody with a high-powered weapon? It's ridiculous to even consider that. The reason why that 18% of the teachers are willing to do that, because they're willing to take care of their kids. Now, they might not understand the responsibility and what that's going to involve, but yeah, I'm not surprised that teachers would do it because they want to keep their kids safe. But it's just not going to work having teachers armed in a school. And when the officers show up on scene, how am I going to know which teacher is which? Now I have a civilian with a handgun and I'm trying to deal with the threat. Now I've got other people in the school with guns. So I don't see a simple solution to it, nor do I see it positive in any way.
And I was just going to say, you know, in talking to kids over the last few weeks, I've spent a lot of time talking to young people, and one thing that really struck me that they asked when talking about their teachers being armed, they basically looked at me and said, do you think a teacher is going to shoot one of their students when they walk in with a gun? You know, how do you expect them to look a student in the eye and shoot them? And it was really, you know, it was really gripping when these kids think about having their teachers be armed. They're also afraid of it. They don't feel that it would be safe. They feel that other students could easily get a hold of that gun.
And then there's another thing that we haven't brought up yet. What is the likelihood that an accident is going to occur?
Well, we saw that happen this week, right?
I mean, this is a textbook case because this teacher apparently was also a reserve police officer. So you have to think this is somebody who would be the most qualified for this kinds of thing. And what happened? A gun goes off in his classroom. And
while he was during a lecture about gun safety at a school in Seaside in Monterey County.
It's ironic. It's incredible that this happened just like this at this time. But I think it's a perfect example of another reason why this is such a terrible idea.
Well, and I think, Chief, what they say, the statistics is that even trained officers who train all the time don't hit their target, you know, 75% of the time.
Yeah, the harsh realities is every one of these shootings that have occurred, the suspect that comes in with a high-powered rifle like that wants to pump as many rounds downrange as he can because he knows the minute he pulls the trigger on that first round, 911 is going to be called, and he has between 5 and 8 minutes to cause as much damage as he can before the cavalry is going to arrive, and they know that, and they're either going to commit suicide or get killed by the police. So to think that, well, let's look at the analogy. The officer in Florida had a hard time trying to go into that building for whatever reason, which he is supposed to. Now we're going to anoint a teacher to have to do that job instead. I can't imagine being in that position, and I can't imagine where some of the teachers' unions also are going to ask for more money to be able to do this job.
Well, you know, speaking of money, this is very important too. I'm actually really quite offended that the president proposed budget cuts to the Department of Education. And yet, all of a sudden, now there's money. He's going to buy guns for teachers. He's going to buy bullets for teachers. He's going to provide training for teachers. And he went as far as to say, well, we should offer a bonus if teachers are willing to do that. And I would just like to say, how about money for books, technology, smaller class sizes, health care for teachers, a decent salary? I mean, I think that's where our priorities should be in education. This is crazy.
Well, the estimated cost of that is $1 billion.
Wow.
All right, we are going to have to leave it there. Peter Gorelick with Pittsburgh High School, Jill Tucker with the San Francisco Chronicle, and Chief Godin with the Oakland Unified School District Police Department. Thank you all for a really insightful discussion. A few weeks ago, we heard from high school student Lily Conable, who talked about fighting for gun control in the wake of the Parkland, Florida tragedy. This Wednesday, Conable organized a walkout at her school, Encinal High in Alameda. We caught up with her there.
We're gonna have you guys line up here, okay? We already put people on that. My name is Lily Conable, and I'm 16 years old. Becca, Naomi, Michael, and Joyce. I'm one of the lead organizers here at Encinal High School in Alameda, California, and right now we're holding our walkout to memorialize the lives of the students from Parkland, Florida, but also to take a stand against gun violence.
For Parkland, Florida, it's a date never to be forgotten.
When I found out about the shooting at Parkland, I was at school and I got the notification on my phone and I was just absolutely devastated because I just thought another one, like how does this keep happening? And for me it hit especially close to home because I'm a high school student.
Walk out of your classrooms now and take a stand in support of gun violence prevention. Walk out now.
Can you guys help us really quick? These are names of victims, okay?
We're not just skipping class or becoming reckless teens. We're making a statement. At Marjory, Stoneman, Douglas, 17 lives were taken. We cannot tolerate innocent lives lost at the hand of a gun. We cannot tolerate political apathy and gridlock in Congress to tell us how to react to these situations.
We want change!
We want change!
If I could say one thing to members of Congress, I would say that there's blood on your hands if you're not doing anything to prevent gun violence in this country.
Let today be a step towards a change tomorrow, a change for the better. Do not forget the lives that have been lost. And remember the reason you walk today, because you are the change.
So we have about 300 coming up from Alameda High School. They're moving quickly.
Stop the bullets! Save the kids! Stop the bullets!
We've really grown up with this type of mass violence. We know about it from social media that really perpetuates all that's happening, and we're really feeling this. Every time there's a fire alarm that goes off in our school now, students worry that there might be a school shooter on campus. Students are fed up, you know, enough is enough, as we're saying, and there's so many amazing student leaders around the country who are saying that and who are rallying students behind them. are now at Washington Park. We just marched down from Encinal with some other schools, and now we're meeting up here with Alameda High and St. Joe's.
Parents are burying their damn children and saying their last goodbyes.
I'm really proud to see how many students are out here and are really making their voice heard. They're braving the rain. It's gross and wet, but they're out here being bold, being proud of what they believe in, and I think that that is really something to admire.
Get up, get down, get the people.
My name is Goddess Cannon. I'm 17 and I go to Island High School. Today I decided to speak because I am a victim of gun violence and I would like to share my story. Someone who I'm close to, they threatened my life with a gun, and someone I'm also very close to at my school, they survived a mass shooting.
And express your concern to Congress. Thank you so much for your time.
I support the students' voice in standing up for what they believe and affecting positive change in this world. I also know that this is just an unacceptable reality that we live with. Somebody someday may come to our school and shoot our children while they're in our care. And it's not acceptable, it's not right.
Due to all the recent school shootings that have been going on recently, high school students like us are forced to practice active shooter drills. During a lockdown drill, students will go under this red dot over here, where we are forced to sit and hide in silence. The red dot is the safest place in the classroom, furthest away from windows and doors, so if a shooter were to enter, this would probably be the last place they look. And during this, our teacher is going to lock the door and close the blinds to prevent access from the shooter to see into our classroom and enter. The three things that we do while dealing with an active shooter on campus is run, hide, and fight. If a shooter is able to shoot through the windows and the doors and get in, you have to fight. And that means taking everything you can, staplers, desks, and throwing and fighting and trying to stall, because a couple of seconds can make a huge difference in a person's life.
To be a high school student today, it's scary, I'm not gonna lie and say that it's not. We are done with gun violence, we are done with school shootings, we are done with... But at the same time, it makes me feel like I have real purpose. I feel an urgency to create change, and I think that it really is this generation that's going to advocate for gun control and to make it actually happen.
We want change.
We want change.
And I would really hope that students would understand that going forward from this day.
When do we want it?
Now.
When do we want it?
Now.
Before we go, we have an update from another high school student. Last week, we brought you the story of Jennifer Bravo, whose undocumented mother had been in immigration detention for a year. Well, we just learned that a judge ordered that Bravo's mother be released, and mother and daughter were reunited this week. And that will do it for us. You can find more of our coverage at kqed.org/newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. Thank you for joining us.